Universal Pictures' 1931 classic Dracula is the beginning of a legend. Really, I mean, it's the first in the line of the Universal monster movies as we know them today. Came out just a little bit before Frankenstein, so kind of both kind of got things started. But this one, it planted the flag. It kind of set the gold standard for not just this Universal Monsters line, but of course for Dracula. And I mean, of course, Dracula. It's been interpreted in many ways over the last, you know, 100 or so years. But there's something about this one. There's something about this specific movie that people kind of look to and say, this is it. This is Dracula. And I have talked about some other Dracula adaptations in the past on the channel, but never about this one. So I thought this would be a good time to talk about it. I've recently been listening to the audible drama of the Bram Stoker novel. It's narrated by Alan Cumming as Jonathan Harker and Tim Curry as Van Helsing. It's very cool, actually. So that had Dracula on my mind, and to be fair, this interpretation, this 1931 film, isn't exactly the most faithful adaptation of the Bram Stoker novel. In fact, it's an adaptation of an adaptation. So rather than adapting the novel, they adapted a stage play version, which, it kind of gets like the general beats down. It gets like the most important parts of the story. One that we all know pretty fairly, beginning in Transylvania, and we meet Dracula, and he takes his journey to London, where he's kind of running amok, and it's up to Dr. Van Helsing to stop this evil, and that's like the most bare bones description I guess you can give the story. This version, I mean, it has some changes, ways of condensing the story. Like, I mean, obviously, kind of one of the big ones. And instead of introducing the Jonathan Harker character in the beginning of the movie, it's actually the Renfield character in the beginning, which it's very I don't know, economic to do so. Like, it makes sense in terms of this story, how they would have this real estate agent journeying to Transylvania, meeting Dracula, and becoming his slave, and that saves a good 30 minutes of like storytelling and establishing things. So that works well. And of course, when we get to London, that's when we meet Jonathan Harker and his affianced Mina, who comes under Dracula's spell, basically, and of course meeting Dr. Van Helsing there as well, and figuring out what this evil is. So pretty beat for beat in terms of the structure of the story. A very short movie, like if you compare it to other adaptations, like an hour and 10 minutes or so. So it gets to the point pretty quickly, but in doing so, I mean, it still kind of becomes the definitive Dracula. In a lot of ways, I mean, we can owe it to its style, which of course, it's well known that F.W. Murnau, who did Nosferatu, just kind of blatantly ripped off the Dracula story without getting any kind of copyright. If copyright laws even really existed as firmly as they do today, which I doubt. This video has been blocked by Universal anyway, but it seems like they took a fair amount from that, and it's basically like kind of like the American interpretation of German expressionists type of filmmaking, which is a nice translation. It's very elaborate with its imagery, with its set design, with a lot of obviously those iconic close-ups of Dracula with the light in his eyes and things like that, and great cinematography by Carl Freund, who a lot kind of credit as kind of in so many ways directing the movie himself, while Todd Browning kind of just like left mysteriously during the shoot and stuff like that. You know, kind of like is it a Steven Spielberg, Toby Hooper kind of poltergeist thing? Who knows? But I mean, for all intents and purposes, Todd Browning directed and Carl Freund photographed the film to great effect, to legendary effect. I mean, the imagery we see, it's become the iconic imagery of what we expect to see in haunted castle type of movie, haunted house, what have you. The cobwebs, the cheesy flying bats and stuff like that. So it's become iconic in that right, and I think we owe a lot to this movie's visual style. But of course, like the biggest pull of the movie has to be its performance. Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, who also played him in the stage version of the film. He's become the gold standard of Dracula. Like, we look at Bela Lugosi in this film, you say that's Dracula. That's how he looks. That's how he acts. That's how he talks. And that's an interesting thing. How, in other adaptations, other interpretations, other actors and filmmaking teams would go out of their way to not be like Bela Lugosi, just because it seems like so stereotypical of like a vampire Dracula kind of thing. Where I mean, this really created the stereotype and broke the mold, I guess. But he's absolutely brilliant, and there's a lot of, I don't know, kind of legend around his performance where they say he didn't know English that well, so he learned each line phonetically. I think that has been proven to be false, but I think that's something he did earlier in his career, where it kind of shaped the way he just kind of emphasized certain lines and spoke in a certain kind of you know purposeful manner, which is just so great. I mean, like, obviously there's the great memorable lines in the movie, children of the night, what music they make, and I don't drink wine. He's great. I mean, like just doing that, cheesy Dracula voice. That's because of him. That's Bela Lugosi's contribution to vampire in pop culture as we know it, and that's an amazing thing. So I mean, we owe a lot to that, and it didn't hurt at all that I guess at the time and probably still today. I mean, certain viewers, maybe like women at the time, found something very sexual about him, and there's some homoeroticism in the film as well. So you know. Dracula is kind of like this all-purpose, seducer, I guess. So there's that. There's like the sexual undertone of it, where it's the vampire kind of legend, lore and all that. It is kind of this sexual, intimate kind of thing, right? The gnawing at the neck, the sucking of the blood. It's an intimate thing, and obviously with this movie, it doesn't get to explicit or anything like that, like maybe we'd see with other adaptations. But the idea is there, basically, right? So there's that. So I mean, you can owe a lot of that to the credit of the film, and it's just a classic film that it would have been really interesting to have been alive at the time in 1931 and seen this movie and like see how like genuinely scared people may have been from the film. Like today, I mean, you look at it, it's like, yeah, this is stereotypical haunted house, cheesy blah 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 Dracula kind of thing. But back then, it must have been pretty frightening. I don't think people had seen at least not much of this kind of thing before, which is very cool. So I mean, it's a movie that I've always gone back to, and a story that I've always gone back to, different interpretations that I've always gone back to and watched and enjoyed, just because it is so good. And actually, this year, for the very first time, I watched the movie again. I watched some of the special making of stuff on the DVD and the commentary and all that, just because I wanted to absorb as much Dracula as I could. And actually, for the very first time, I watched the Spanish version, which for years I had heard that it was kind of the superior version. It was done much better, and that's such an interesting thing all on its own. Like how this is 1931. We're still kind of progressing from the silent era to the talkies. So I mean, it's a pretty simple fix with the silent films. The character talks and they put up the dialogue, and it can be in any language in any part of the world, right? Which, apparently because of just the period of time, the transition, some theaters wouldn't have audio capabilities for like the language tracks, so some would edit it to be a silent film, and they would have the dialogue up. But there was just like such a demand, specifically in Spanish-speaking markets, to have a talkie, to have it in Spanish, and I guess it was just something that they realized over at Universal. So like, okay, we're gonna make simultaneously. We're gonna make this Spanish version along with the American version. So that's exactly what they did. So same sets, same marks, just different Spanish-speaking actors, and it's an entirely different film. Though it's the same film in a lot of ways, but it's the Spanish language version. So it's such a fascinating thing to see. Like, you really don't see that today. I mean, like, obviously today, it's a pretty simple thing where you can take a movie and dub it, right, and that would be it. But here they went to the lengths to actually film an entirely different version, and having watched it now, I can see why a lot of people would say it's a superior version. It's just so it's a strange thing. It's the same, but it's different. I mean, how else can you put it? But just there's a different type of visual style to it. Kind of shows off the mise en scene in kind of a different way, and of course different performances. But the only thing really missing from it is Bela Lugosi. So I mean, if he had been in that version, if he had spoken Spanish, man, it probably would have been the definitive version. But I mean, maybe I'm biased because, of course, I mean, I like the well-known classic version of the film, the one that everyone knows, which is, needless to say, the English language, the American-produced version, which is the classic as we know it today. But it's such a curiosity to see that Spanish version. Well worth checking out if you're a fan of the original Dracula film and want to see it kind of from this different angle, which is great to see, but lacking Bela Lugosi. That's the only thing. He's brilliant in the film. He's the definitive Dracula. No matter what they do, Christopher Lee, he's great. Gary Oldman, great. Frank Langella, he's great. But Bela is, he's like the Connery for Bond. What you know he is for Dracula, I guess. Best way to put it. Rest of the cast is really, really strong as well. I really like the performance by Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing, who, of course, he's in so many ways he's the hero of the story. Though, of course, he's maybe not so much in this version, but of course, if you've seen the other versions, read the book, he's kind of like a sketchy kind of guy. But an unorthodox type of doctors is how they would put it, I guess. But he's great. He was in the stage play adaptation as well. He's wonderful, and there's just something about how he presents the character in that as being, if you want to put it that way, the hero of the film. He's not, first thing would come to mind is like, the hero to save the day, not this dashing young man with the chiseled jaw or anything like that. Like they would eventually kind of do like later on in adaptations. Fucking Hugh Jackman, action hero kind of thing, which is ridiculous. But it just goes to show, so it's just kind of like a learned man, a man with an open mind, and knowledge and a strong will. Can do battle against this force of evil without having to be the traditional type of hero, which is very, very cool. And of course, Dwight Fry playing Renfield, absolutely maniacal. Those are eyes that never really leave you. The eyes in this smile is just absolutely chilling to this day. In fact, I think maybe some people will find Renfield scarier than Dracula himself. Just the fact that he is, I don't know, not supernatural but human. Madness can take over anyone, right? And that's a scary thought. So it brings to the horror of the film and brings kind of a human face to it, quite literally. And Helen Chandler, great as Mina. David Manners as Jonathan Harker, also great. But obviously the draw here is Bela Lugosi and his iconic performance, one for the ages. I mean, you can look at any number of performances across cinema. You can say, oh, this guy won an Oscar, this guy's a Shakespearean actor. But who really has like as big of an impact on film and pop culture as Bela Lugosi as Dracula? Not many. I mean, this is where it's at. This is, pure interpretation of a character that has been solidified for decades, nearly 100 years old. This movie's getting close to. So that's a great accomplishment. It's a great movie. I mean, come on. It's an absolute classic. Dracula, 1931. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I mean, maybe, try the Spanish language version. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. But this is the classic. This is, the gold standard. This is the legend of Universal Monster Classics beginning, which is quite an incredible thing, and a thing I value very much and is beloved all over the world nearly a century later. That's something. So that's my review. Thank you very much for watching. We're doing 31 Days of Horror here on the channel in October 2021. So new horror movie reviews every day. Be sure to stay tuned for more. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you again later, and until next time, stay scared.